Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Accessibility for Every Brain, Tips for Facilitating a Neurodiverse Classroom with Krisstal Clayton. We'll go ahead and get started here. So my name is Victoria Velasquez. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for our psychology list here at Sage Publishing. And I have the pleasure of being joined today by Krisstal Clayton. Krisstal is a clinical professor and Director of Undergraduate Programs and Associate Chair of Academics for the Department of Psychology at the University of North Texas. She received her PhD from New Mexico State University. Her faculty career began at Western Kentucky University, where she received the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences Excellence in Teaching Award in 2015. She's passionate about engaging and inclusive pedagogy and regularly provides invited talks and workshops on teaching. As a professor, Dr. Clayton is a student favorite, known for her gamification techniques, storytelling, and application of fascinating real-world examples to psychology. She is a consulting editor for the Journal of General Psychology. But Dr. Clayton isn't all work and no play. She's an avid yogi and cook who nerds out on documentaries, binges National Public Radio podcasts, collects vinyl records, roughhouses with her dogs Aria and Phoebe, and loses her voice at concerts. When her students need a little pick-me-up, she makes some playlists. Music is her answer to just about everything. So welcome, Krisstal.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
So at the end of the webinar, we will have some time for Q&A from the attendees. So please use your Q&A box to ask any questions to the speaker throughout the webinar. I'll keep track of those, and then we'll let Krisstal answer them at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Krisstal.
Great. So thank you again for having me. Greetings, everyone. First, I want to state that I used to know absolutely nothing about this topic. And if you're anything like me, when I started learning, it seemed a little overwhelming. So please know that I am going to deliver a lot of information today, but at the end of the webinar, I am going to be able to provide you with some really great resources. So I hope that you can stay with us for the entire time, but let's go ahead and jump in and get started. I'm really excited to share this information with you. So we're going to begin with a polling question. I want you to just think about what is neurodiversity. So you're going to get a polling question pop up on your screen. Please choose the selection that you feel is the best response. I'm going to read those aloud to you. So your options are social justice movement, natural differences in thinking, emoting, learning, and behaving, all persons who fall within the range of neurotypical to neurodivergent, or the last option is all of the above. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to make those choices. All right, so based on the data that Victoria just shared with me, it looks like most of you chose all of the above. And congratulations. Next slide, please, Victoria. All of you are going to get a gold star because yes, all of the above is correct. Now, those of you who didn't select all of the above, that's okay. I didn't know that all of these things were included either when I was learning about neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is a term that was coined by Judy Singer, and the purpose of the term was to ignite inclusivity in education, the workplace, and society for persons who think, emote, learn, and behave differently than the neurological majority. So currently we refer to the neurological majority as neurotypical. Now, neurodiversity also includes all types of people from neurotypical to neurodivergent. And when we talk about persons who are neurodivergent, these persons have conditions which include but are not limited to ADHD, autism spectrum, and learning disorders such as dyslexia. Next slide, please. So the chances that you have a neurodivergent student or students in your classroom are pretty good. According to the NIH Division of Genetics, they estimate that 15 to 20% of the world's population exhibits some form of neurodivergence. So I want you to imagine that you're teaching a course, maybe it's got about 125 students in it. That's the typical size of my undergrad courses at UNT. So within this classroom of 125 students, you would have at least, if not more, 3 students who are neurodivergent. So these imaginary students are named Hui, Gloria, and Corey. So Hui has dyslexia. Her challenges are reading at the same pace of her classmates, completing some assignments and exams in the time allowed, taking notes, and writing grammatically correct sentences. Then we have Gloria. She has autism spectrum. Gloria frequently struggles with understanding jargon, taking notes, collaboration, completing tasks when instructions are not thorough, and focusing. Last, we have Corey. Corey's difficulties are submitting work in a timely manner, staying organized, consistently attending class, multitasking, and remembering details. Next slide, please. So for those students who are neurodivergent and who have been recognized to have ADA accommodations by your institution's maybe Office of Disability or office that oversees ADA accommodations, you would likely get maybe an email, a letter, some type of list informing you what you need to provide to your students so that your classroom is ADA compliant, so that you can best support your students' learning. Some of these options, or maybe all of them you might have seen before, are things like assigning a note taker to the students to help them with taking notes while you're delivering lecture. Ensuring that you reformat text so that it is compatible with a JAWS reader. JAWS readers are often used by students who are visually impaired. Then also requiring closed captioned media, and maybe you might have to provide a special place where the student can take an exam. So exam proctoring is pretty typical. And then what I often see is that students might need extra time to submit an assignment. I'm warned that they might forget that an assignment is due, so they ask that I be flexible with missed due dates, and that some students might have an absence every once in a while. Next slide, please. So accommodations sent to you by your university's Office of Disabilities or ADA accommodations provides just a wonderful way to support students with diverse needs, because it gives you this really nice list of knowing, okay, this is what I need to accomplish to support the student's learning. And while, again, these accommodations are great, they also require disclosure. And many students really choose not to disclose. And they might choose this due to the stigmas that are associated with their neurodiversity. Or we also have students who probably aren't even aware that they're neurodivergent. For example, a survey conducted by the UK National Autistic Society found that 42% of females with autism spectrum are first misdiagnosed with disorders such as social anxiety, borderline personality disorder, or ADHD. Therefore, the chances that you have students in your classroom like Corey who have not disclosed, or like other students who don't even know they're neurodivergent, well, those chances are also pretty good. Next slide, please. So then where do we start, right? How do we help the students who we know have ADA accommodations, but those who might be invisible to us because they haven't disclosed or they don't even know that they're neurodivergent? So it really goes without saying that an accessible classroom begins with instructor awareness and delivery of ADA compliant materials and assignments. This was the most difficult part for me to start because there was so much to learn, and I absolutely can't cover all of this in the short amount of time we have. But at the end of this webinar, I have something that I can give to you, right, courtesy of Sage, that has a list of links to free tutorials and lots of resources where you're going to be able to teach yourself how to create ADA compliant assignments and also ADA compliant presentations using Google Slides or PowerPoint. But the place where I was able to start that helped me the most when I was trying to create a neuro-inclusive classroom was looking for a textbook that I knew was published by a company that was really dedicated to ADA compliance. And that took a ton of guesswork out of it for me. And it really supported me in understanding the things I need to look for. And so usually with these textbooks are also going to be packaged ADA compliant instructors resources, which could include assignments, as well as ADA compliant media. So some publishers have a wealth of information and videos that we know are going to be closed captioned and are also going to come with transcripts. And Sage is definitely one of those publishers. Now, if you're looking for ADA compliant media, I always reach out to my librarians. They are so full of knowledge. They know exactly where they can find these resources. And it took a lot of the work off of my shoulders, and our librarians were more than happy to jump in and assist me. If you don't have that opportunity, then there are organizations like Frontline, PBS, and NPR who ensure that all of their media is going to be closed captioned. And for things like podcasts, they're also going to ensure that there are transcripts that are made available to go along with these podcasts. So something that I want to keep emphasizing is that these types of ADA compliant materials aren't only going to be helpful for the students who are neurodivergent, they're also going to be helpful for the range of students who are included in that neurodiverse umbrella. So neurotypical as well. And also students who have a first language other than English, students who benefit from being able to modify the media. So maybe by slowing things down because they can't keep up the pace of the speaker, or they might need to increase the font size because they are struggling with their vision, or they need to plan or begin their work in advance. So that's another thing that I try to do in my classes. I try to make sure that my assignments are going to be available to students at least 1 week in advance if it is a quiz, right? A short assignment, or 2 weeks in advance if it is going to include some writing, and I want students to have the time to do that deeper thinking. Next slide, please. Now, when I was starting to wrap my head around ADA accommodations for students, I was looking a lot at patterns, and I noticed again that a lot of students were needing extensions for due dates, that they needed some flexibility in case they were absent or they forgot an assignment. So I decided to just package this in a way that would be available to everyone in the classroom. And I do this in a method that you really don't have to ask me any questions. You don't have to send me an email to describe what has happened. Instead, you just let me know that you are going to use what I consider to be the OOPS pass. This is what it's actually called in my syllabus. So this OOPS pass provides any student with a one-time 48-hour extension on an assignment. I don't include exams and reading quizzes in this because, as I'll discuss with you in a few minutes, I do something different for exams and quizzes. But for assignments like discussion boards, a writing assignment, anything of that nature, if a student misses that deadline, they can send me an email within 12 hours of missing that deadline, and then they automatically get this OOPS pass, no questions asked. For reading quizzes, I offer more reading quizzes than I require. So right now I offer 11 reading quizzes and I only require 10. If students do all 11, they get to keep the points, but if they miss a reading quiz, it is no big deal whatsoever. And if they don't do well on one of the reading quizzes, that's okay too. They can go ahead and take that extra reading quiz that is floating around and they get to keep those points. As for exams, I do something that's a little controversial. I offer all of my exams through the learning management system. So right now at UNT, we use Canvas, and I program exams in a way that questions are released one at a time. Students cannot go back to previous questions, and the exams are timed. So this reduces cheating, but it also provides all of my students the opportunity to actually take their exam from a location that is most comfortable for them, that is most conducive to their learning. Because several students have test anxiety, or in a room of 125, you can imagine that there's a lot of noise happening. People are shuffling around, they're sniffling, they might be tapping their fingers on the desk, and all of these things can really have an impact on the other people around you and their ability to focus. Now, let's say a student forgets to take the exam because, well, they're not showing up to my classroom to do this, right? They're logging in from anywhere. This can absolutely happen, but just like it can happen with those who need these ADA accommodations, right? Maybe their anxiety is off the charts that day. Maybe they really need to just take a step back and have that mental wellness day to themselves. That's okay too, because in my course, I offer 3 exams and then an optional cumulative exam at the end of the semester. Any student who misses an exam can take the optional cumulative exam at the end of the semester, and any student who does poorly on exams 1, 2, or 3 also can take that optional cumulative exam. So this has greatly reduced the anxiety that my students feel when their performance isn't at their level, or if they happen to forget something, or they just really cannot engage with the exam on that day. Now, this is also very helpful to students who, again, act as a caregiver, experience an illness, maybe a student has a commuter issue, or they simply forgot they had a deadline. And it's helpful to me because it has greatly reduced the number of emails that I get. And I also started learning that some students were much better at negotiating than others. So something that you might notice with neurodivergent students is they have a hard time expressing what they need, and they might not express it to you at all because, again, they're trying to avoid that stigma. So I've tried to remove the students need to negotiate from the equation and just have it automatically built into my course, so they already have those support systems there if they need it. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move on to a lot of Cheryl Bergstaller's work. She is an expert in this area of making an inclusive space for persons who are neurodivergent and who need ADA accommodations. And Bergstaller constantly recommends that you use clarity and scaffolding. So clear expectations and instructions are definitely key. And then scaffolding is also very helpful. So thinking about the big picture and then breaking it down into smaller chunks. So smaller assignments that are going to teach the students all of the skills that they need to reach that successful final submission, whether that is going to be a big final project or a writing assignment, or maybe they are going to do a presentation in your classroom. So in order to achieve this, we really have to unpack the task for our students. So starting with our learning objectives, what do we want students to be able to achieve? And then thinking about what are all of the skills that my students are going to need, as well as what are the resources they're going to need to have so that they can achieve these learning objectives that I really want my students to be able to meet. So for example, if this is a team-based research proposal, then we have to consider that students will likely need to format an APA, find peer-reviewed articles, apply the experimental method, demonstrate presentation etiquette, and be able to collaborate. So we have to think about how can we build these assignments so that students can learn all of these skills, right? And then we have to make sure that we can build an understandable grading rubric. Transparency in grading avoids any surprises. And having that rubric delivered to your students, in addition to the instructions, does provide students the opportunity to really know how they are going to be graded. How is my performance going to be assessed? And if there's any confusion, I have time to ask my instructor. And having that time can really reduce the amount of confusion that might happen when students are trying to understand what are my performance markers. Now, I'm sure you have tried this before, right? Giving the rubric and instructions in advance, and students just haven't read them. Well, my answer to that is including peer review. So Bergstaller also mentions over and over that providing students opportunities for practice and correction is a great way to support our neurodivergent students and also neurotypical students. So what I like to do is really kind of crowdsource, right? I like to take advantage of all of these great students I have in my classroom and provide the opportunity for them to look at the rubric and then use that rubric to provide feedback to their peers. And this enables students to get very familiar with the rubric, to use it themselves. And then they're seeing how other students are tackling this task. So they might learn something, right, from the actual peer that they're reviewing. And it also might remind them that, oh, we don't have this included, or I didn't do this, or is this right APA formatting? Maybe I did something wrong, or maybe I know it really well and I can now help that other student. So this is a wonderful way to give students those opportunities to improve, taking that peer review, using it to get into their own assignment, make those changes before they submit it to you, and again, to get really comfortable with those instructions and that rubric. Next slide, please. So now that we've talked a little bit about ADA compliance and having some flexibility in your syllabus, as well as providing students opportunities to improve, I want to move into having conversations about neurodiversity in the classroom. So making an inclusive space definitely means we're going to exude that in our conversations with our students as well as our behaviors. So for this next polling question, I want you to think about how you would describe someone who is neurotypical, right? So what descriptors do you associate with persons who are neurotypical? You can check all that apply, and your options are as follows: conforming, focused on social norms, believe that others should think like them, find it difficult to be alone, or struggle with saying exactly what they mean. So you can choose as many as you like, and I'm going to give you a few more seconds to send us in your responses. Okay, Victoria has delivered the data to me, and this looks great. So a lot of you chose conforming. Several of you also chose focused on social concerns, struggling with saying what they mean. Yes, definitely. We could connect a lot of these descriptors to persons who are neurotypical. Next slide, please. Now, I actually present this question to my students because I really want them to take a step back and think about what are some of the stereotypes that we associate with persons who are neurodivergent? And are there any stereotypes associated with persons who are neurotypical? And I didn't just make this question up off of the top of my head. There is a neurodivergent blogger who presents these really funny scenarios based on his perspective as someone who is neurodivergent. And one of these really interesting hypotheticals that he presents is if the DSM were written by neurodivergent clinicians, how would it describe neurotypicals? And I find the parody to be very effective for sparking a conversation with your students about what is and what is not typical. Another effective method for blurring the lines between what we see as typical and what society might consider to be abnormal is to also ask them what stimulus might put them over the edge. So what is something that if they hear it or smell it or see it, it really gets to them. For example, the sound of a paper towel being ripped in half just makes me cringe. It always has. I don't know why. So if paper towels were constantly being ripped over and over again while I delivered this webinar, I would probably have a meltdown. So when I think of the importance of reducing stimuli in the classroom environment for my students who are neurodivergent, I just remind myself of this sound over and over again of ripping paper towels on repeat. And I ask my students to think of the same thing so they can get a better idea of what it might be like for someone sitting next to them to have to be exposed to maybe the blinking fluorescent lights or all of these different noises, or someone who's constantly, shuffling in their seat. Can that have an effect on their focus and their mental wellness? And the answer is absolutely. Then I also like to talk about areas where persons who are neurodivergent excel. So think back to the polling question about these neurotypical descriptors. And yes, I did craft this question to really, once again, get us thinking about negative stereotypes. Unfortunately, we don't tend to look at the positives of those who are different. So what I try to do is really flip that and focus on what neurodivergent persons bring to the table. And this is really important for me when I start laying the groundwork for collaborative assignments in my classroom, which we're going to talk about soon. Next slide, please. Now, another way that I make sure we have constant conversation about neurodiversity is I try to normalize the conversation. Now, if we think about some of our textbooks, they might not talk about neurodiversity at all, or they might only talk about neurodiversity in very specific chapters. So what I like to do is figure out how I can weave the topic of neurodiversity into as many things as I'm going to teach about as possible. So some of these topics could be sensation and perception, cognition, social justice, engineering. So by sparking this discussion, I try to really apply neurodiversity by having real-world examples such as driving and color blindness, young adult hearing loss, mental rotation and engineering, females in STEM, as well as social justice issues. For example, undiagnosed dyslexia does have a correlation with juvenile delinquency, and persons who are neurodivergent find it difficult to get employed. So what's happening there? And neurodivergence and the rate of employment is a topic that's very important to me because I feel as an educator, it is my job to prepare students so that they can have that career because I want them to be independent. I want them to achieve their dreams. So how do I get students really thinking about neurodiversity in the workplace? Well, that takes me to our next slide, please. Neurodiversity in employment is popping up more and more. And Bloom noticed this way back in 1998 when he wrote this really great article in The Atlantic about persons who are neurodivergent. And what Bloom recognized is that this biodiversity in our brains and how we see the world and how we think and emote and behave is going to be incredibly important for our societies to evolve. And more employers are recognizing that, yeah, Bloom was right. So a lot of these employers now understand that persons who are neurodivergent think different than those who are neurotypical, right? Hence the term neurodivergent. And they also demonstrate exceptional skills at problem solving, incredible accuracy, even though when they're doing the task quite quickly, as well as being incredibly reliable. So some of these companies, and this is not all of them, but these companies that are really starting their own neurodiversity initiative are Ernst & Young, Chase, Deloitte, and even the Department of Defense. So at the end of this webinar and part of my resources, I'm going to provide you with links to connect to these neurodiversity initiatives and also provide you with some free resources where there are trainings for students who are neurodivergent so they can start learning those skills, how they can behave in an interview, or ways that they can do better at team building. Next slide, please. And team building is something that all of these employers are interested in because they want neurodiverse teams, right? They want their neurodivergent employees to be part of these teams because they have also learned that the more we get people who think differently in one team, the more creative the solutions are going to be, the better the problem solving. So how do we make sure that our neurodivergent students get those opportunities? Well, we do it in the classroom, right? What better place to teach our students about working collaboratively than our classroom where we can facilitate their success? There are a lot of benefits that the research demonstrates to team-based learning, things like belongingness, retention, also discrimination and bias reduction, and it also has been demonstrated to increase academic performance and self-efficacy. But you can't get all these benefits if you're just kind of throwing students together and telling them to figure it out. I know when I was in school, and even now as a faculty member, just throwing a bunch of people together on a team usually doesn't go well. In fact, it's often cited as the cause for ineffective teams and bad group work experiences. So we have to be mindful about how we're going to set these teams up for success and demonstrate what good teamwork looks like. What are the steps that you need to take in order to have a team that really does work well together? Next slide, please. So in my opinion, the best place to start is to have students reflect on, okay, what do I bring to the table, right? How am I going to contribute to this team? And I learned this really great activity from Stoddard and Pfeiffer at this wonderful workshop that I went to, where they ask students to build a skills concept map. So every individual student is going to have areas that they have to connect to themselves. And then from those areas, they have to list what are all of the things that I have in this particular area that I can bring to my team. And then students also list 3 areas of growth. So what do they want to get better at? So this self-reflection exercise helps students understand where is their value and also where do they want to improve. So for example, a student might decide that they want to get better at writing, or they want to really hone their skills in video development, or maybe they recognize that they struggle in public speaking, so that is an area of growth that they want to tackle. Next slide, please. So this is actually an example of what a skills concept map would look like. So in the middle, you have Gloria, and then radiating from the center name, you're going to have these areas of technical expertise, organizations and clubs, project relevant experiences, personality traits, and passions and interests. So every student in your class would have to have all of those included. And then from there, students make it their own. So for example, in Gloria's passions and interests, we see that she speaks 3 languages, that she volunteers at hospitals. With her technical expertise, she's good at coding, she's really good at PowerPoint. And then personality traits, she's ethical, responsible, organized, and a planner. I mean, these are all fantastic traits for a teammate. But we might not never have known that Gloria had all these things going for her. In fact, students might have just judged her simply because maybe she wasn't very talkative, or because maybe English isn't her first language. So again, teammates are going to look at these skills concept maps, and they're going to get a better understanding of what their teammate brings to the table. Now, another thing I really love about this activity is I get to see all of these wonderful things that my students have. I would never be able to see this or really collect all of this information unless I had a really long conversation with them and they were willing to give me the answers. So I have used this activity time and time again, and I've never been disappointed. And I often have students tell me that they had no idea that they were this skilled and that it really helped them start conversations with their teammates. Next slide, please. So for this particular skills concept map, it's a really great way to start team building because now all of these skills are out in the open. And now it can be connected to what my next step is in team building, which is creating the contract. So I have a pre-made contract. Again, if you're interested at the end of this webinar, we will absolutely send you a copy of one of my contracts. And what students get to do in these teams is choose what areas of leadership they want to have, and then what areas they want to grow in. So this gives students the opportunity to say, okay, I know that based on my skills map, I would be really good at project management. So I'm volunteering to be one of the project leaders. Now, these contracts provide clarity and also a really great mechanism for accountability. Next slide, please. So this is just a little snapshot of a piece of the contract that I have created. And what you can see is that we have areas like being a project manager, and underneath that are all of the bulleted items that the project manager is going to oversee. And then we also have literature review and APA citation librarians. And then we have the students who have decided they want to take those leadership roles, or they have a desire to develop in that area. And this is how we're going to make sure that we know which students are going to be responsible for which pieces of the project. Next slide, please. Now, I've also had experience, and I think the teams are doing great. And then at the end of the semester, I have so many students rushing at me to tell me, oh my goodness, Corey didn't do anything. He just completely dropped the ball, and the two of us were stuck doing everything. And it took me a while to figure out that, I should probably do a mid-semester peer evaluation. So I created a rubric, and at mid-semester, I allow teams to review one another so that we can provide those opportunities for students to improve. And this also aligns with Cheryl Bergstaller's idea that, opportunities to improve are really going to help your students succeed, regardless of where they fall, from neurotypical to neurodivergent. But we do know that collaboration can be a challenge for neurodivergent students. So offering this feedback mid-semester does give them the opportunity to modify their behavior if necessary. It also gives me the opportunity to take a quick look and see if someone is struggling in a particular area, and then I have that opportunity to intervene, whether that be meeting with that student in office hours, sending them an email, speaking to them after class. And in my rubric for peer evaluations, there are no ratings about personality or likability. Instead, I have kept it very limited to specific constructs that are going to contribute to the success of the final project. Next slide, please. So this is actually a snapshot of the contract that I use for my peers, right, to evaluate their teammates. Again, I have included this in the free resources if you would like them at the end of this webinar. And as you see, I have constructs like deadlines, idea quality, work quality, respect, and communication. And so in the middle of the semester, they're going to be able to rate one another on these. You're going to be able to see, okay, this is where I can improve. And then we do this again at the very end of the semester. So by doing this twice, we get to see, has there been a shift? Did this particular student actually make the effort to do better in the areas where they were struggling? You can also choose to make this peer performance review part of their grade. So for example, if the team determines that Corey earned an overall 80% performance score, then you could have that reflected in what they earn in their final project. So if the final project was 100 points, that's what the team earned, but Corey only did 80% of the contracted work that he said he would do, then maybe Corey only gets 80% of those 100 points, which means Corey would get an 80. Now, this method really does keep teammates accountable, and it also teaches all of our students about the importance of participating as they promised. Next slide, please. So creating an inclusive and an accessible space where neurodiversity is a lot of fun for me, but as you can see, it also takes a lot of work, and I don't want to scare you away. So please know that you can do this bit by bit and course by course. And slowly what you're going to see is that your classes are going to become ADA compliant and very accessible to pretty much any learner. And students who were once left behind will now be in an environment where they're able to move forward, whether you know it or not, right? And then something else I've also noticed, which has been a great side effect, is that students are learning from the example I'm setting in the classroom, that I value neurodiversity and that they're participating in these neurodiverse teams. They're having fun, they're making friends, and they're also starting to recognize the value of neurodiversity and what it looks like to be ADA compliant. So I've had students come back to me and share that they've taken this into their workplace and that they've also taken it into other interactions outside of my classroom, which I find to be just incredibly rewarding. So I know that this takes some time and I really want to support you. So what I've done is I've also collected my references. Next slide, please. So here I've got all of them listed for you. I highly recommend the Stoddard and Pfeiffer 2018 resource. That is the skills concept map that I use it all of the time. And then Burgstaller's work, specifically her 2020 resource about inclusive learning design. She is one of the experts on this. So great read, highly recommend. Next slide, please. Last, I keep telling you that I've packaged all of these resources, and I have. So I've got some really great links that we're going to be able to give to you that are free tutorials on accessible course delivery, how to make your PowerPoints, Google Slides, Google Docs, Word documents, ADA compliant. There are links to universal design guidelines, free ADA compliant media, some articles that you might want to read about neurodiversity and social justice issues that are connected with that, as well as I promised, free copy of my team contract and also the peer performance evaluation. So please look in your little chat box. You'll be able to see that link. Just click on there and complete that survey. And my wonderful people at Sage, Victoria, will make sure that you're able to get your hands on those free resources. And so that is it now for all of the knowledge I wanted to share with you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Victoria.
Thank you so much, Krisstal. That was really fantastic. And I did put that survey link in the chat, so please be sure to click on that and just take that really quick survey and you'll get the resources. And if you want to learn more about Krisstal's book, Essentials of Psychology, you can do so by visiting sagepub.com/intropsych, and you can request free review copies there also if you're interested. So now we definitely want to spend some time addressing some questions. Please continue to send them in via that Q&A box, and we will try and address as many as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. So Krisstal, the first question for you from one of our attendees: for those of us with different educational backgrounds, how do we effectively incorporate these conversations about neurodiversity? My background is composition and rhetoric. This definitely does not qualify me to have these conversations, although I recognize their importance.
Yes, I have spoken with faculty who are in the English department, and some things that I have recommended is that maybe we can find some neurodivergent authors, maybe assign some things that neurodivergent authors have written, and if possible, create a writing assignment where students are going to reflect on that particular neurodivergent author's work. Something else that we can talk about in our classrooms is just, what might it be like for someone who is neurodivergent to have to participate in a writing task, right? There is this wonderful podcast that is called Neurodivergent Women, where they do reflect on what would life be like if we didn't value reading and writing so much, if that wasn't the way that we looked at people being intelligent or being able to get a career, such as being an instructor. So maybe proposing those types of hypothetical questions might get students thinking about just not what it is like to read and write, right, in our society, but also how can I do this perspective taking? You also might consider having students write a paper from a neurodivergent perspective and then a neurotypical perspective. What might be the similarities and what might be the differences? So those are just some suggestions that I hope you find to be helpful.
Thank you. And the next question: I have already incorporated many of these ideas into my classes, which are entirely online. They're using Canvas and are asynchronous. Do you have any other specific suggestions for this modality?
Or asynchronous. Yeah, my course, I have a course right now that is asynchronous. If you're already doing group work in your course, that's great. If you're not, I would suggest that you absolutely do. and try to package students into little teams if at all possible. Something I've noticed with also my neurodivergent students is that they can't always connect with certain topics. So I teach a psychology of the offender course, and there are some things that they just cannot engage with. So I try to provide maybe more media than is necessary so that students can choose what they decide they want to watch, what they want to stream, and then also what they want to comment on. So I try to build those extra little things into my asynchronous classes as well. Then I also do my best to maybe set up, I know Canvas now has new analytics, so I try to set up these parameters, which lets me know if a student is falling behind, if they're missing excessive work, because if they don't have those ADA accommodations, then they just might get lost in the shuffle. So by having these things set up, I can have those constant reminders to check in, to make sure that they're doing okay. And then also, I'm a big communicator. So I frequently post things so that I'm trying to make sure that my students are staying engaged. And that's really where I found it to be the biggest struggle, is just reaching out to my neurodivergent students as much as possible, just to make sure that they have everything that they need. Because yeah, without that, the feedback face-to-face, we're not always sure. And without them coming to class, right, we don't know if they're consistent in their engagement. So yes, a lot of communication is something I highly recommend.
Great, thank you. And next question. Is it permissible or desirable for faculty to discuss neurodiversity with students one suspects is undiagnosed?
I would say no, because I have had many conversations with people who are neurodivergent, and some of them have shared with me that they chose for a very long time not to disclose. And I know there can be a power imbalance between students and instructors. So what I try to do is just open up the conversation with everybody and talk about the things that I mentioned in this webinar. And I kid you not, every semester I've done this, I've had students come up to me and say, I think I'm going to go to the counseling and testing center and actually get tested for this. Or, hey, I want you to know that I have ADHD and I was afraid to tell you, but now I'm not. So if you can just open up those conversations and just let the students come to you, I find that to be much better, because there's also neurotypical students who might have these same types of behaviors, right? So I wouldn't want you to maybe set yourself up for failure or isolate that student as well. So I would say let them come to you, and they will do that if you make your classroom environment inclusive.
Great, thank you. You mentioned an interest in gamification, which is also an interest of mine. What are a few ways in which you tailor gamification to be inclusive and engaging for all students?
Oh, yeah. I love gamification. But I know that sometimes, especially with neurodivergent students, it's hard for them to just jump right into the game, right? So I try to make sure that the rules, the assignments, everything is set up for them about a week in advance so they can review that and they can kind of prepare themselves. And then I provide opportunities for students if they need to bring in their own technology. I have students who are visually impaired, so I can't just hand them a document. But if they have it ahead of time and they can put it on their screen while they're in class, then it does facilitate their learning, and they're better able to participate with their teammates. So just getting all that ready ahead of time has really helped me support their learning. I also try to find different types of ways to engage students with my gamification techniques. So I know not all students can participate in, let's say, a Jeopardy, because if the question's just popping up on the screen immediately, then students who are visually impaired can't see that. So I try to think about how can I make those adjustments, and maybe students can actually play the game within their teams using their own technology. And so when I do that, I just walk around the classroom constantly so that I can help students with any questions that they have. And then I just really leave the game playing to them within their teams.
Great, thank you. And do you think that self-disclosure of neurodivergence is helpful as an instructor?
I'm a big fan of self-disclosure. To be honest, I share with my students the kind of trauma that I've had, and not to, get them to feel uncomfortable, but instead as part of conversations that are already happening in the classroom. So if you want to share with your students, I think that would be great, because something that we know in social psychology is if you can't see it, it's hard to be it. So knowing that there you are as an instructor who is neurodivergent, I think that would probably be something that your students would get not only inspiration out of, because, oh, wow, I can do this too, but also I think it would open up a really great conversation about, did you maybe have, you could even ask questions about, so did you think this about me? Yes or no? Does anyone else want to talk about, neurotypical versus neurodivergent? Who are some people that you can name, right, who are neurodivergent? I would love to participate in that discussion. So if you want to do it, I say go for it, right? And you can maybe test it with a close group just to see how it goes first before you self-disclose in front of all of your students. That's what I did. I kind of dipped my toe in the water with people that I trusted, and then slowly worked my way up to a large class size for my self-disclosure.
Great. And one of the attendees has a question about a possible kind of resource, I guess. So they're asking if the book Quiet by Susan Cain, Quiet the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, if you think this is a useful resource to use in the kind of neurodivergent universe.
I think that is an excellent choice. There's also a great way to talk to your students about, well, we talk about extroversion and introversion like it's no big deal. Why can't we talk about neurotypical and neurodivergent in the same way? So when we think about persons who are neurodivergent, yeah, they absolutely could have those needs of, well, maybe I don't want to engage, right? Maybe being around people is really draining. So yeah, learning about introversion and what can help persons who are introverted would absolutely support you in being able to develop an inclusive space.
Great. And do you recommend a place to find out if you are neurodivergent?
So for students, it really depends on what kind of resources your university has. Here at UNT, we do have a counseling and testing center where students can make an appointment. And if they want to get tested, then our university will set those things up for them. If you are not a student, then of course, there are other pathways that you can take. For example, reaching out to your insurance provider. That is their job to find the right person that you need. So some people prefer to go straight to a psychiatrist. Others prefer to go to a clinical psychologist who is an expert in assessing neurodiversity. So either of those pathways, I would check with my insurance provider first, and then just, think about, what do you want to know? Because showing up to these appointments saying, okay, I think I want these assessments done because of, all of these experiences and things I've noticed about myself. They might quickly say, let's have some more conversation before we do those assessments. Or they might just go ahead and deliver those assessments to you as soon as they can. It's really up to them. And then students, if they have insurance, maybe because of their caregiver or an employment, right? They might have their own insurance, then those are also options for them to get tested.
Great. If a course is built to be automatically accessible according to ADA standards, does this mean that I will never have to adjust anything in my course for students who need accommodations?
No, it's going to greatly reduce the work, but it doesn't mean it's going to be accessible 100% perfect for everybody. So for example, while I do release my tests on Canvas, right, that's where they're disseminated, I still have students who need extra time on their exams. So I just go right into Canvas, I add that modification that this particular student needs time and a half, and then we're good to go. I will also have students who will use their OOPS pass and then they'll miss another deadline. And so I try to be as understanding as I possibly can and say, okay, so you've already used your OOPS pass. So now let's work on what happens with this next assignment that you missed. So there will be times where you will absolutely need to add a little bit more flexibility case by case. But overall, it's going to dramatically reduce the amount of work that you put in if you don't have anything that's ADA compliant.
Great. And I think we have time for maybe just one more question here.
Great.
I have a couple of students who wear their AirPods during exams. Have you experienced this? And if so, can you please share your thoughts?
Yes. While I give my exams through Canvas and any place that they choose, I do have students who will wear their AirPod during lecture and in-class group activities. And the students have shared with me that a lot of that is white noise because they're trying to drown out all of the other noises that are happening in the environment, which is making it hard for them to focus. They're likely not listening to exam answers, right? Because they probably don't have them. But it's really just their own ability to take control of their environment and really reduce that stimuli that's happening around them. I also have students who wear sunglasses because the flickering of the fluorescent lights can give them migraines. So I try to be as supportive as I can to allow students to add what they need to make those adjustments for themselves. And this is also something that's happening in the workplace for persons who are neurodivergent. They're getting asked questions about, do you want to sit close to others or away from others? Do you need noise reduction headphones? Do you have an adverse reaction to fluorescent lights? And so they're making all these adjustments in the workplace as well. Therefore, I'm perfectly fine reflecting that in my classroom.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This was a really great webinar. Thank you so much, Krisstal. The recording will be emailed out to everyone in the coming days, so please be on the lookout for that if you would like to watch the webinar again or share with any of your colleagues. And thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.